Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The storm outside rattled the windows, the command center glowing with screens and red indicators, the kind of night when decisions meant life or death. And yet, there she stood. Recruit Lily, 22 years old, hair tucked beneath her cap, green eyes fixed on the digital map glowing on the table, a soldier in uniform but invisible in the room. They didn't hear her voice. They didn't even look her way. To them she was nothing more than an observer, a body in the corner assigned to watch and learn, not lead, not suggest, certainly not decide. But she saw something they didn't. A narrow cut through the mountains, a ravine hidden in the folds of the terrain. She knew it wasn't on their charts, because she had studied maps no one else cared to touch. Geological surveys, county archives, documents gathering dust until her restless eyes consumed them. And now that forgotten line on a map could be the only thing standing between six stranded soldiers and death. Colonel Richards didn't want to hear it. His bark silenced her before she even finished her first sentence. "You're here to observe, recruit, that's it." His voice thundered against the storm, louder than the rain slashing across the windows. He didn't even look at her, just dismissed her as if she weren't even there. Officers smirked. One lieutenant chuckled under his breath, the kind of laugh that cuts deeper than words. Lily's face stayed neutral, but her thoughts raced. This was the pattern she'd been living since stepping onto the base 3 months ago. She was a rookie, a woman in a room of men who measured worth in scars and years of service. She had neither. She had studies, training, quiet determination, but those didn't earn respect here. Not yet. Still, she couldn't shake the image from her mind. The ravine was real. She had memorized every bend, every contour. She could feel it, almost as if the land itself whispered to her, "This is the way. This is where the answer lies." But what was a whisper against the roar of command? Colonel Richards slammed his fist against the table. The official plan would take 4 hours. 4 hours in a storm closing fast. 4 hours while injured soldiers and a general waited in a wrecked helicopter with fuel leaking and enemy patrols circling. The storm would cut off all hope of rescue by then. Everyone knew it, even if no one wanted to say it out loud. She looked again at the glowing map. She wanted to speak. She wanted to scream. But something inside her shifted instead. A quiet resolve. A thought forming with the clarity of lightning. If they won't listen, I'll act. Her heart thudded with the weight of the decision. She knew what it meant, defying orders, risking not only her career but possibly prison. Yet another voice, quieter, older, echoed inside her. Her father's words long before she put on the uniform. "Sometimes, Lily, the right thing and the permitted thing are not the same. When lives are on the line, you'll know which one matters." She knew. And so, when the room dissolved into another round of arguments and raised voices, Lily slipped out. No one even noticed her leaving. Not one set of eyes followed her. She was invisible. Good. Outside, the storm swallowed her whole. Rain soaked through her fatigues instantly, cold against her skin. Lightning split the sky in jagged lines. She pulled her cap lower and moved quickly toward the barracks, toward two men she recognized from her training rotation. Private and corporal, both steady, both loyal, both just crazy enough to follow someone they trusted, even if that someone was technically just a rookie. She found them at their post, eyes widening when she explained what she needed. Balked first. "Are you insane? That's against every regulation in the book. They'll court-martial us. You, me, all of us." His voice cracked under the weight of fear. Lily didn't hesitate. "6 soldiers and general will die if we wait. You can stay here if you want. I'm going." The words came out sharper than she expected, like steel leaving the forge. Even she heard the difference in her voice. No tremor, no uncertainty. Studied her face, searching for hesitation and finding none. "You really think you know a way through?" "I know I do," she answered simply. That was enough. 10 minutes later they were moving through the rain, packs loaded, weapons checked, boots sinking into the mud as they slipped past the checkpoint. 3 shadows swallowed by the storm. No fanfare, no permission, just the beginning of something none of them fully understood yet. Cursed under his breath with every step, but he followed, stayed silent, scanning the tree line as they pushed forward. And Lily, she led. Every marker, every turn, imprinted in her memory like it had always been waiting for her to walk this path. The deeper they moved into the forest, the more treacherous it became. Roots tangled underfoot. Mud grabbed at their boots, sucking them down like the earth itself wanted to claim them. Visibility shrank until the storm reduced the world to shadows and lightning. Behind them, Fort's lights disappeared completely. "If you're wrong, we're all dead," shouted over the wind, gripping his medical kit. Or worse, dishonorably discharged. Lily didn't waste breath responding. She pressed forward, her eyes sharp, searching for the rock formations she knew must be there. And then, there it was. A split boulder, jagged and unmistakable, just like on the survey. She adjusted their course slightly northwest. "The crash site should be about 3 miles through this ravine," she called back. "It'll get steeper, but it's passable." Checked his GPS, squinting through the rain. "Command's official rescue team is headed east. They won't even be halfway by the time we get there." Lily didn't reply. She didn't need to. She just kept moving. But inside, her thoughts tangled. This wasn't just about being right anymore. This wasn't just about proving herself. General was out there, the same man who had approved her assignment to Fort when Colonel Richards pushed back. The general had seen something in her file that others didn't. If he died now, his belief in her would die with him. And that thought cut deeper than the storm's cold. A crack of thunder split the air. A massive tree, roots loosened by the storm, crashed down just feet away, sending mud and branches spraying. Stumbled back with a strangled curse. Lily didn't flinch. She only steadied herself, voice strong. "Stay focused. Follow my exact path." Something in her tone shifted the men. Doubt didn't vanish, but it quieted. They trusted her, at least enough to keep moving. Minutes turned to hours, each step heavier than the last. The ravine narrowed, forcing them into single file along a ledge so thin it seemed impossible to walk. Below, jagged rocks waited in silence, eager for mistakes. His voice came ragged. "How the hell did you even know about this path?" "Geological surveys," she answered without turning. "Mining operations back in the 40s, not on military maps, but they're documented in the archives." "You studied county archives for an observer mission?" asked, breathless. "I study everything," she said simply. It wasn't bravado, it was fact. Halfway through the pass, their radios crackled. Colonel Richards' voice cut through the storm. "All personnel be advised. 3 soldiers have left base without authorization. If encountered, they are to be detained immediately and returned to command. This is a direct order." The words hung heavy in the air. His face went pale, cursed softly under his breath. But Lily didn't break stride. Her boots slipped once, catching herself before the abyss swallowed her whole. Grabbed her arm in a lightning-quick reflex, steadying her. "Thanks," she breathed. "Don't mention it," he muttered, but something in his tone had shifted too. He wasn't doubting anymore. He was invested. The storm only grew worse. Wind whipped against them like claws. Mud slicked the rocks until every step became a gamble. Lily's muscles burned. Her lungs ached. But her mind stayed sharp, eyes locked on the path, one step after the next. And then smoke. A thin column cutting through the rain, rising in the distance like a beacon. "There," she shouted, voice nearly swallowed by the storm. "That's them." The 3 of them pushed harder, adrenaline surging. The ground dropped steeply, the ravine funneling them toward the valley floor. And then they saw it, the shattered on its side, rotors twisted, smoke pouring from its wreckage. Bodies scattered across the mud, some moving, some horribly still. Froze, cursed, but Lily didn't hesitate. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She sprinted. "Triage, secure perimeter, I'll find the general." She was already on the wreck before they answered, climbing the twisted fuselage as flames licked at the edges. Inside, chaos, groans, sparks, the metallic stink of blood and fuel. Her boots slipped, her hands clawed at the metal. "General, sir, can you hear me?" A cough answered from the shadows. And in that moment, the rookie no one listened to became the leader no one could ignore. How much weight can one pair of hands carry when lives hang in the balance? Lily didn't think about the question as she pulled herself into the wreck. The acrid sting of smoke filled her lungs. Sparks spat from severed wires above her head. Every second she lingered inside the twisted fuselage felt like gambling against a clock she couldn't see. Over here, a weak voice rasped through the haze. Her eyes cut toward the sound. A man pinned beneath a slab of collapsed cabin wall, his uniform shredded, his chest rising shallowly with effort. The silver star on his collar gleamed faintly in the firelight. "General, alive, barely." "Sir," she said, crawling across the broken interior. "I'm recruit, we're going to get you out." The general coughed, eyes narrowing as they focused on her face. His voice was faint but laced with disbelief. "The observer, what the hell are you doing here?" "Disobeying orders, sir." Her tone held no apology, only fact. She braced her hands against the jagged metal pinning his leg. It didn't budge. The stink of fuel thickened, the fire outside growing louder, hungrier. General winced, sweat streaking his dirt-caked face. "How many survivors?" She swept her eyes across the cabin. Two more soldiers in sight, one unconscious, strapped to his harness, the other clawing weakly at the buckle restraining him. She counted quickly. 4 of 7. The pilot and co-pilot didn't make it. Sergeant Mills is outside, injured but mobile. The general's eyes closed briefly, then moved fast. Her hands trembled for only a second before she clenched them into fists. Trembling didn't save lives. Action did. She shouted, her voice cut through the storm outside. Boots scraped metal. A moment later, the corporal appeared at the hatch, eyes wide as he scanned the devastation. He didn't waste time asking questions. He dropped into the cabin beside her, bracing his shoulder against the slab. "On 3, Lily ordered. 1, 2, 3. The wreck groaned. Metal screamed. Together they heaved, muscles straining, backs threatening to snap under the weight. For an agonizing breath it didn't move. And then, with a screech sharp enough to rattle teeth, the debris shifted free. Gasped as pressure released from his leg. Compound fracture. Lily saw it instantly. Bone pressing beneath torn flesh. One wrong move could end him before they even carried him out. Her mind flipped through training like splint. Stabilize. Don't let adrenaline rush them into mistakes. She worked methodically, her voice clipped and firm. "Get that soldier free. Status outside." From beyond the smoke came a shout. "2 wounded, 1 walking. I'm working on them now." The storm slammed against the broken helicopter like a living thing, howling, clawing. Inside, Lily's hands worked fast, fashioning a splint from metal tubing and fabric torn from her own uniform. His jaw clenched, but he didn't cry out. His eyes never left her face. "You shouldn't be here," he said between ragged breaths. "Maybe not," she answered, tightening the final strap. "But your authorized team would have been too late." Another explosion shuddered through the wreck, sending sparks raining over them. Flames licked closer, tasting the edges of the fuel-soaked mud. "Time up," shouted, dragging the second survivor free of his harness. They didn't argue, they didn't look back. They moved. Lily and hauled between them, his weight heavy but refusing to slow their pace. Guided the wounded toward a sheltered outcrop 30 yards from the wreck. Every step was agony, a gauntlet of fire and storm, but somehow they made it. They barely cleared the perimeter when they erupted. A fireball roared skyward, showering sparks across the ravine. The ground shook, the storm itself seeming to recoil from the force. Hit the mud hard, shielding his patient. Lily dropped to her knees with arms instinctively curling over him as shrapnel hissed past. The heat scorched her back, but her focus never wavered. When the roar subsided, only a smoldering carcass remained where the helicopter had been. Their only cover, their only supplies, gone in the inferno. "How do we get them back now?" demanded, his voice raw, edged with panic. He pressed compresses against a soldier's wounds, his hands slick with blood. "The ravine path is impossible with casualties." Lily's mind spun, scanning the terrain. Every option was death waiting to happen, until her memory flickered again, an image from those forgotten surveys. A meadow, flat ground half a mile north, just wide enough for a helicopter if the weather cleared. She pointed. "There, half a mile north, it's our only shot." Followed her gaze. "That's suicide with stretchers. We'll lose them before we get halfway." "Then we make better stretchers," Lily shot back, already ripping material from her pack. "We move together, slow and steady." His gaze lingered on her as she worked. His face pale, his legs strapped, but his eyes sharp despite the pain. "You weren't studying maps for an observer mission, were you?" he asked quietly. Lily paused, her hands tightening on the fabric. She didn't answer, not with words, she didn't need to. The general's expression shifted, something between suspicion and respect. Back at Fort, alarms blared. On the monitors, a distant fireball burned across the storm. Officers shouted, radios chattered, men scrambled to update the command chain. Colonel Richards stormed into the room, rage etched into every line of his weathered face. "Get me visuals on that explosion. Where the hell is my rescue team?" A lieutenant approached cautiously, eyes flicking nervously to his superior. "Sir, satellite confirms the destroyed. No sign of survivors." The colonel's voice cracked against the silence. "General was on that helicopter." But before he could finish, a communications officer raised her head. "Sir, we're receiving a signal, weak, but it's coming from the crash site." Static bled into the room, then her voice, calm, clear, firm. "Fort, this is Recruit. We have 4 survivors, including General, requesting immediate extraction at coordinates 34.15 by 109.36. Weather window required. Moving to higher ground. Over." The room froze. Colonel Richards' face went pale. "Impossible." But the voice came again, steady despite the static. "Negative, Colonel. We have wounded who cannot traverse the return path. Continuing to extraction point. Over and out." The line died. And then another voice from the doorway. Cold, authority wrapped in iron. "Sounds like someone's doing your job, Colonel." Major General, commander of Fort. His silhouette filled the room, eyes burning through Richards like searchlights. "Sir, I can explain," Richards began. "Save it," cut him off. "Your team is hours out. A recruit and 2 soldiers already reached our men." His voice carried the finality of a gavel. "Prepare immediate medevac, and get me everything you have on this recruit." Back in the storm, Lily pressed forward, leading the broken line of survivors through the mud. The meadow was out there. Hope was out there. But so was exhaustion, fear, and the gnawing knowledge that every minute they lost was a life bleeding out in the mud. "Set him down here," she ordered as they reached a clearing rimmed with pines. The storm still raged, but the sky above cracked open slightly, a wound in the clouds spilling faint light. Just enough. "Scan the narrow field. This is your landing zone. It's the size of a postage stamp." "It's big enough for a skilled pilot," Lily said, setting flares in a triangular pattern. "And it's our only chance." Checked his patient's pulse. "This man has an hour at most." His voice broke, the weight of reality pressing against every syllable. Lily clenched her fists. Doubt clawed at the edges of her mind. She shoved it back. Doubt didn't help. Action did. She climbed to a higher rise, wind slamming against her as she raised the radio again. "Fort Command, this is Recruit. Extraction coordinates reached. 4 wounded, 2 critical. Weather clearing. Request medevac. Over." Static, her heart sank. Then a reply, crisp, sharp. "Recruit, this is Major General. Status report on General." Her throat tightened, the base commander himself. She forced her voice steady. Compound fracture, possible internal bleeding, stable for now. A pause. Then softly, almost pleading, "Sir, we need that helicopter now. The storm is opening, but it won't last." Silence, a breath. Then's voice returned. "Extraction team spinning up. ETA 15 minutes if the window holds. Hold position. Out." She lowered the radio, mud dripping from her gloves. 15 minutes. The longest 15 minutes of her life. Propped against his pack, studied her face with unreadable eyes. That was not Richard's. "Yes, sir," she replied. "Interesting," he muttered. The storm raged, but above it all came the faint sound of rotor blades. At first just a whisper, then louder, stronger, a heartbeat in the sky. "They're coming," shouted, pointing west. Lily grabbed the flares, igniting them in sequence. Red light burned against the night as the helicopter emerged from the clouds, threading the needle through the storm with impossible precision. His voice cracked with awe. "They'll never land this in time." "They will," Lily interrupted, her eyes fixed on the descending bird. "Watch." The helicopter touched down with surgical grace, mud exploding around its skids. Medics poured out, rushing to the wounded. General was lifted onto a stretcher, his face pale but calm. As they carried him, his hand shot out, gripping Lily's arm with surprising strength. "This isn't over, recruit. You're coming with us." She shook her head. "Sir, my team and I will hike back. There's no room." "That wasn't a request," he cut in, his voice iron despite his pain. Minutes later, Lily found herself airborne, the meadow shrinking beneath them, the storm retreating to shadows below. For the first time since the night began, silence wrapped around her. Not peace, just silence. And in that silence came the weight of doubt. Had she made the right call? Had she saved them or doomed herself? She glanced at the general, his eyes closed, his chest rising shallowly. And she remembered the moment she chose to act. The voice of her father, the whisper of the ravine. She would face the consequences, whatever they were. Because sometimes, the only thing heavier than disobedience was regret. How do you face the storm when it's not thunder outside, but fury waiting on the landing pad? The helicopter banked through the clouds, engine straining as it carried them home. Below, the mountains stretched like jagged scars across the earth, fading into blackness. Inside the cabin, the air buzzed with urgency, medics moving from one broken body to the next, voices clipped, hands steady. And yet amid all the chaos, Lily sat utterly still. Her mind churned even as her posture remained rigid. She had done what she had to do, but the thought clawed at her. When the skids touched down, it wouldn't be gratitude waiting. It would be judgment. General broke the silence. His voice was low, gravel mixed with pain, but his eyes still sharp. "You know you've violated every direct order, every regulation, every rung of the chain of command." Lily met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, sir." "Why?" The question carried weight. It wasn't curiosity, it was challenge. Her answer came without hesitation. Because the official response would have been too late, because lives mattered more than protocol. The general studied her, not angry, not impressed, just searching. Finally, he leaned back against the stretcher, pain tightening his jaw. "Do you know why I had you assigned to my exercise, recruit?" Her heart stuttered, she shook her head. "I read your file, perfect scores, tactical brilliance on paper, but every commander noted the same thing: you don't respect the chain of command. I wanted to see for myself whether you were insubordinate or exceptional." She didn't answer, she couldn't. Words felt too small for the storm inside her. The general closed his eyes again, his voice almost lost to the roar of the rotors. "I think I have my answer." The helicopter descended. Through the rain-streaked window, Fort emerged from the darkness, a grid of lights burning against the storm. On the landing pad below, a crowd had already gathered. Medical teams, officers, enlisted men. and at the front, stiff-backed, face contorted with rage, Colonel Richards. Lily's stomach clenched. The storm inside had arrived. The helicopter skids hit the pad. The door slid open. Medics surged forward, rushing to extract the wounded. Was lifted with care, his stretcher carried toward the waiting ambulances. And in that moment, Richards cut through the crowd like a knife. "Recruit," his voice cracked like thunder, louder than the dying rotor blades. "Front and center." Every eye turned toward her. She stepped down from the helicopter, boots hitting the wet pad with a heavy finality. Mud streaked her fatigues. Branch cuts her face. But her posture was flawless, back straight, chin up, salute sharp. "Colonel," she said evenly. He stormed forward until his face was inches from hers. Rain slicked across his reddened skin, veins bulging at his temples. His words spat more than spoke. "You disobeyed direct orders, stole equipment, endangered 2 soldiers, interfered with an official rescue operation." His voice rose with each charge, drawing the crowd around them. "Have you any idea the charges you're facing? Insubordination, dereliction of duty. I'll have you court-martialed before sunrise." The crowd murmured, shifting uneasily, and escorted off a secondary chopper arrived just in time to hear the threats. They stood at attention beside her, silent, expressionless. Lily didn't respond. She held her salute, eyes locked forward, her silence sharper than any defense. "Sir," Lieutenant Brooks tried cautiously, stepping forward. "Perhaps this discussion should take place in private." "Private?" Richard spun, his voice dripping with fury. "No, this needs to be public. Every recruit needs to see what happens when the chain of command is broken." But from behind them, another voice cut through the storm, weak but commanding. "Colonel Richards." The crowd shifted. General, pale and broken, waved the medics to halt his stretcher. Even injured, his tone carried the weight of command. "Sir, with respect," Richards blurted, straightening. "You need treatment. I'm handling this insubordination." "Are you?" His eyes burned despite his exhaustion. "Because from where I'm lying, it looks like you're publicly berating the soldier who just saved my life." The words crashed over the pad heavier than the storm itself. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Richards faltered, his anger cracking for the first time. "Protocol was violated," he sputtered. "Sir, the proper channels." "The proper channels would have left us dead." His voice cut like a blade. The silence was suffocating. Every face turned, waiting. Rain hammered down, pooling at their boots, but no one moved. Major General stepped forward at last, his expression unreadable. "Colonel Richards," he said coldly, "report to my office at 600. We'll discuss command structure and emergency protocols then." His gaze shifted to Lily. "Recruit, you and your team 0700 sharp." The tension snapped, orders given. The crowd began to disperse, whispers already spreading like fire in the wind. Richard's face twisted, his jaw tight, his voice low enough for only Lily to hear. "This isn't finished, not by a long shot." He turned sharply, disappearing into the shadows, and flanked Lily silently. For a long moment, the 3 of them just stood there, the storm dripping from their helmets, the firelight of the rescue pads reflecting in their eyes. "Worth it?" asked quietly. Lily let the silence linger before finally answering, her voice steady but soft. "Every second." Hours later, long after the pad had cleared and the medics had vanished with the wounded, Lily sat on her bunk in the barracks. The storm outside had calmed, but inside her, unease still churned. She stared at her hands, still scratched, still raw, and wondered if the general's words would save her, or if she'd wake tomorrow stripped of uniform and purpose. The door creaked open. Lieutenant Brooks stepped in. The usual smirk was gone from his face. He looked older as he stopped at her bunk. "Colonel Richards is pushing hard," he said without preamble. "Says it's about discipline, about order." Lily met his gaze evenly. "And what do you think it's about, sir?" Brooks hesitated. His eyes flicked away, then back. I think it's about the fact that you succeeded where he failed. He handed her an envelope sealed with official insignia. This came from General's office, for your eyes only. Without another word, he left. Lily opened the letter with steady hands. 3 lines, that was all. 700 hours. Dress uniform. Some rules exist to be followed, others exist to be broken by the right people. Signed simply. She folded it carefully, tucking it into her breast pocket. Tomorrow everything would change. She didn't know whether for good or ruin, but she knew one thing with absolute clarity. When the moment had come, she had chosen lives over protocol. And sometimes that choice was its own medal, even if no one pinned it to your chest. Dawn crept across the horizon, painting the base in pale gold. The storm had broken, leaving the air heavy and still. As the sun rose, so did whispers. Soldiers murmured in corridors, recruits exchanged glances in the mess hall. Word was already spreading. By the time Lily stepped from her barracks, pressed into her dress uniform and flanking her, every eye seemed to follow. They walked in silence, their boots striking in rhythm against the pavement. "Whatever happens in there," said quietly, "I'd follow you into hell again." Same, added, nodding. "No regrets." They entered headquarters at 6:58, 2 minutes early. Waiting in the hall, packing like a caged wolf, was Colonel Richards. His glare cut across the space, his voice dripping venom. "Enjoying your last moments in uniform." Before Lily could reply, the door to the general's office swung open, and there stood, leaning on a crutch, his leg wrapped in a fresh cast, but his posture still radiating authority. "All of you inside." The 3 recruits stepped into a room larger than Lily expected. Major General sat behind his desk. 3 high-ranking officers filled the side chairs. On a video screen, 2 more generals watched from distant commands. The weight of the entire military machine pressed against the walls. This was no disciplinary meeting. This was a tribunal. "Stand at ease," ordered. His eyes swept the room. "Colonel Richards, you've made your position clear. Recruit violated orders. You're recommending dishonorable discharge, correct?" Richards straightened. "Yes, sir. Military discipline cannot function when recruits decide which orders to follow." Nodded, then turned. "Recruit, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Lily stepped forward, voice even. "No excuse, sir. I made a tactical decision based on the information I had. I accept the consequences of my actions." Richard scoffed. "She admits it." "Quiet, Colonel," interjected sharply. His eyes shifted back to Lily. "Would you make the same decision again?" Her answer came without pause. "Yes, sir, every time." A silence fell, heavy, electric. And then addressed the room, his voice gaining strength. "Yesterday's events represent something more than broken protocol. They reveal a principle at the core of our service: initiative, moral courage, the ability to act when hesitation would kill. That's what defines a soldier, not blind obedience." He gestured toward Lily. "This recruit identified a flaw in our plan. She proposed a solution that was ignored. And when inaction meant certain death, she acted. That action saved 4 lives." The room shifted. Officers exchanged glances, some skeptical, some thoughtful. Richard's face reddened with fury. "Sir, with respect," he argued, voice trembling with contained rage. "You're letting her personal connection cloud your judgment." His eyes narrowed. Personal connection. I had never met recruit before yesterday. "Then why was she assigned as your observer?" Richards shot back. For a moment hesitated, then his gaze flicked to a nod, permission. Turned back to the room, his words cut like a blade. "Because, recruit, Lily isn't who you think she is." The silence that followed was absolute. And in that silence, the storm inside Lily began to break. What if the recruit everyone ignored was never a recruit at all? The tribunal chamber was silent, the air so tight it seemed even the storm outside dared not intrude. Officers leaned forward in their seats. The video screens flickered with the faces of generals tuning in from distant commands. The weight of revelation hung, suspended in the room like a blade waiting to drop. His eyes locked on Richards as he spoke. His voice was steady, cold, deadly certain. Before yesterday, only 5 people in this room knew the truth. Recruit Lily is no recruit. Her file, the one you've seen, was deliberately altered. The reality is this. She graduated top of her class at West Point 3 years ago. She completed force recon training, served in classified operations, and for the past 18 months she has worked directly under the Joint Chiefs as part of the Military Readiness Initiative. Gasps rippled through the room. The silence broke into murmurs, then fell still again. Major General leaned forward, his voice measured but firm. Her assignment here at Fort was never observation alone. It was assessment, to test your command structures, to see whether protocol was being followed at the expense of lives. Lily stood frozen at attention. Her heart pounded, but her face betrayed nothing. Her cover was gone now. She had always known it might end like this, though not so soon, not so violently revealed. Colonel Richards' face drained of color, rage, and disbelief twisting together in his expression. "That's impossible," he whispered. She's just a girl. I had no idea." "That was the point," snapped. "No special treatment, no expectations, just truth. And the truth is that yesterday, Captain Lilly, he emphasized the word with deliberate weight, saved lives by defying you." The word hung in the air, Captain. Every head turned to her, eyes widening with the revelation, and jaws nearly dropped. They exchanged quick glances, stunned into silence. "Captain," whispered under his breath. Shifted against his crutch, his injured leg trembling as he stepped forward. "Richards, your rigid adherence to rules over results nearly cost 4 men their lives, including mine. Acted with initiative, courage, and judgment. You dismissed her outright without consideration. That is dangerous. That is failure." Richard staggered a step back, his voice cracking. "Sir, I couldn't have known." "And yet she did," cut him off. "She knew, she prepared, she acted. That is the mark of a soldier." The silence that followed felt like judgment itself. Finally spoke, his words final. "Colonel Richards, effective immediately, you are reassigned to Fort Benning for command retraining. You will report by week's end. Dismissed." Richards' mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time, he had no retort. He looked at Lily, hatred burning in his eyes, before saluting stiffly and leaving the room. His boots echoed down the corridor until they disappeared into nothing. The tribunal shifted, turned his gaze back to Lily. "Captain, your cover here is finished, but your assessment will continue. I expect a full report in 1 week. Your mission remains unchanged. Determine whether our protocols serve soldiers or hinder them." "Yes, sir," Lily said, her voice even though her chest ached with the weight of it all. Looked past her too, and, "As for you two, you followed into danger knowing the risk to your careers. That judgment, that trust, reflects the kind of soldiers we need. Commendations will be added to your records." Both men blinked in disbelief, gave the smallest nod, muttered under his breath, "Well, I'll be damned." The tribunal ended. The generals on the screen signed off, their faces vanishing one by one. Chairs scraped. Officers filed out, until only Lily and remained. Stepped close, his hand steady on his crutch, his eyes fixed on hers. "Captain, you proved yourself in the field. Now prove yourself on paper. Don't waste this chance." She held his gaze, steady despite the storm raging in her chest. "I won't, sir." The room cleared, and finally the 3 of them walked out together, Lily. The corridor buzzed with whispers as they passed. Soldiers paused mid-step, conversations dying in throats. Everyone stared. The recruit who wasn't a recruit. The soldier who had broken the chain of command and won. When they reached the sunlight outside, finally broke the silence. His laugh was half disbelieving, half incredulous. "Captain, you were a captain this whole time. You let me order you to carry my pack last week." Lily cracked the faintest smile. "That's because you were slower than me. Didn't change anything." Shook his head, still stunned. "You're telling me we followed a captain into a suicide mission without knowing it?" "No," Lily corrected softly. "You followed me. Title didn't matter." They fell quiet at that, because it was true. Later, as dusk painted the sky in muted orange, Lily walked alone along the training grounds. The storm had washed the earth clean, leaving the air sharp with pine and damp soil. Her boots traced the path recruits marched every morning. She had walked it countless times as recruit, invisible among the others. Tonight, every step felt different. Every glance from passing soldiers carried weight. Respect, fear, curiosity. She could feel the shift in the air, and it pressed heavy on her shoulders. For the first time in years, she questioned what came next. Her cover was gone, her assignment exposed. She had saved lives, yes, but what of the soldiers who hadn't trusted her? What of the men who smirked when she spoke, who laughed when she suggested an idea? Would they ever see her as anything but the woman who embarrassed them? Her thoughts spiraled until a voice called from the shadows. "You walk like a soldier who's already carrying tomorrow on her back." Leaning on his crutch, bandaged but unbowed, his eyes sharp despite the pain. Lily stopped. "You shouldn't be walking." "Neither should you," he said wryly. Then his tone hardened. "But we walk anyway, don't we? That's what sets us apart." They stood in silence, the wind rustling through the trees. Finally spoke again, quieter. "Do you know why you were chosen? Why your file crossed my desk?" She shook her head. "Because you represent the future of this military. Not rules, not blind obedience. Judgment, courage. That's what wins wars and saves lives, but it will also make enemies. Men like Richards will hate you for it. They'll try to break you, because if you're right, then they're wrong, and they can't stand that." Lily's chest tightened. The words carried more weight than she wanted to admit. "What do I do?" she asked softly. His eyes held hers. "You do what you've already done. You act when it matters, and you accept the cost." He turned, limping back toward the infirmary. But before he disappeared into the dimming light, he added, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts." The words stayed with her long after he was gone. Night fell. Lily sat in the barracks, and nearby, the quiet hum of the base surrounding them. She held Snout again, her thumb tracing the signature. Some rules exist to be followed. Others exist to be broken by the right people. The truth pressed heavy on her chest. She had stepped into fire and survived. But fire leaves scars, and tomorrow would demand more. And for the first time since the mission began, she wondered not whether she was strong enough to face it, but whether the world was ready for someone who was. How do you wear a uniform when every eye around you now sees a stranger? Morning broke crisp and clear, the storm swept away as though it had never been. But inside Fort, the air carried a different kind of storm, whispers, rumors, shifting glances that followed Lily wherever she went. The recruit they had ignored yesterday was now a captain, and the truth of that revelation left the base unsettled, like a wound still raw. She walked across the parade ground in full uniform, her captain's insignia now visible, catching sunlight that seemed too bright for the weight she carried. Soldiers stopped mid-step to look at her. Some nodded with hesitant respect. Others turned away, muttering, their pride wounded. She could feel it, the fracture her presence had created. And walked beside her, their expressions unreadable. Muttered under his breath, "Feels different today, huh? Yesterday you were one of us. Today you're something else." Lily's jaw tightened. "I'm still the same person." "Maybe," said quietly, "but they don't see that. They see the rank, the deception." The words cut sharper than she expected because she knew he was right. She hadn't meant to deceive them, not personally. The mission had demanded it. But now, every conversation, every handshake, every nod carried that invisible question. Who is she really? Inside headquarters, she reported for the assignment had given her. A week. 7 days to deliver a full assessment of Fort's emergency protocols. 7 days to put into words what she had already lived in the fire of the ravine. That rigid obedience could kill as surely as an enemy bullet. The task wasn't just paperwork, it was truth distilled. Truth that some men at this base didn't want spoken. Her temporary office was bare. A desk, a lamp, a stack of files waiting. She sat, her fingers brushing over the folders, but her mind wasn't on them yet. Her mind was on the faces, Richard's livid and broken, Brooks torn between loyalty and realization, the recruits who had once smirked when she spoke. What would happen when her assessment became official? Whose careers would it end? A knock broke her thoughts. The door opened and Lieutenant Brooks stepped in. His usual smirk was back, but dimmer, edged with something heavier. "Permission to speak freely, Captain," he asked, the word captain carrying both respect and disbelief. "Go ahead," Lily said. He closed the door behind him, leaning against it. "You've turned this place upside down. Men don't know what to think. Some are calling you a hero. Others, well, let's just say they're not thrilled about being tested without knowing it." Lily leaned back in her chair, studying him. "Which are you?" Brooks hesitated, then shrugged. "I think you scared the hell out of Richards, and maybe that's what this base needed. But be careful. Pride doesn't die quietly. Richards isn't the only one who will push back." Lily nodded. She already knew. For the rest of the day, she pored over after-action reports, training manuals, communications logs. The official rescue protocols read like a checklist written for a world without storms, without chaos. On paper, they looked flawless. In reality, they had nearly cost lives. She wrote long hours, her pen carving truth into paper. The chain of command failed. The delay was fatal. Initiative must be valued, not punished. But as daylight faded into evening, another knock came. This time, and their expressions were tight, serious. "Captain," said, the word still foreign on his tongue, "there's something you should know. Some of the men, they're saying you only acted because you knew would protect you, that you had an inside line all along." Lily's chest tightened. "That's not true." "I know," said. "We know, but truth doesn't matter much when pride's wounded. Watch your back." Added, "They're already calling you the Phantom Captain. Half respect, half suspicion. You're a ghost to them, someone who wasn't what they thought. Ghosts don't get trusted easy." Their words lingered long after they left. Alone again, Lily stared at her reflection in the darkened window. The face was the same. The scars on her cheeks from the branches, the tired eyes. But the uniform told a different story now. The next day summoned her. His office was grand, wood-paneled, the weight of authority heavy in every corner. He didn't waste time. "Captain," he said, sliding a folder across the desk, "your actions have stirred more than dust here. Higher command is watching closely. Some are impressed. Others are furious. What you write in this report will echo far beyond Fort." Lily picked up the folder, her grip steady. "I understand, sir." Studied her, his gaze sharp. "Do you? Because this isn't just about what happened in that storm. It's about the kind of military we want to be. You'll make enemies if you write the truth. Powerful ones." "I already have," Lily said softly. Almost smiled at that. "Almost? Good, then you're ready." When she left his office, the sun was setting again, painting the sky in blood-red streaks. She walked slowly across the base, the words echoing in her mind. The kind of military we want to be. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every soldier who had ever been ignored at a table, every recruit silenced before they finished a sentence, every life lost to pride disguised as protocol. But change demanded sacrifice, and she knew the cost would be hers to bear. That night she sat in the mess hall. Soldiers filled the room, laughter and noise clattering against the walls, but the air shifted when she entered. Conversations hushed. Heads turned. She took a tray of food and sat alone at the far table. Forks scraped. Murmurs rose. And then appeared, trays in hand. Without a word they sat beside her, solid, loyal. Their presence cut through the whispers like a blade. For a moment, Lily let herself breathe. Not a smile, not relief, just breath. Because in the silence of their loyalty, she heard the truth louder than words. She wasn't alone. But even as they sat, a question lingered in her mind. Would loyalty hold when the weight of truth came crashing down? Or would tomorrow break even the strongest bonds? Because truth was coming, and truth never arrived quietly. What happens when the enemy you face isn't across the battlefield, but standing inside your own walls? Fort woke restless. The storm had passed, the sun burned high, and yet an invisible weight pressed down on the base. Men drilled, officers barked orders, vehicles rumbled across the motor pool. But beneath the rhythm of military routine, whispers still carried. About the crash, about the ravine, about the rookie who was no rookie at all. Lily felt it with every step, the stares, the half-salutes, the lingering pauses in conversation as she walked past. Captain, recruit, phantom, hero, traitor. She was all of them at once, depending on which mouth spoke. She pushed through it, her focus narrowed to the task it given her, completing her assessment. Every page she wrote pulled her deeper into the truth. Fort was built on a foundation that valued obedience over judgment, pride over initiative. The rescue mission had proved it brutally and beyond doubt. But truth on paper was one thing, truth in practice was another. And practice, she suspected, was coming. At noon, the summons arrived. Not from Richards. The messenger was stiff, uncomfortable, but clear. Colonel Richards requests your presence at Training Field 3. Immediately. Lily almost laughed. Requests. Richards didn't request anything. This was bait, plain and simple, but she went. She had to. The field buzzed with recruits running combat drills, their shouts and movements crisp in the midday heat. Richards stood at the edge, arms folded, his shadow cutting sharp lines across the dirt. His expression was carved from stone. "Captain," he said, the title dripping from his tongue like poison. "Glad you could join us." Every recruit on the field slowed, eyes darting toward them. Whispers spread like fire through dry grass. Richards raised his voice so all could hear. "Since our captain seems to know better than protocol, I thought it only fair to let her demonstrate. These recruits are running live scenario exercises. Let's see if her initiative holds up under pressure." It wasn't a request. It was a challenge, a trap laid in broad daylight. Lily stepped forward, her boots sinking slightly into the dry earth. She could have declined. She could have cited her assignment, her authority. But she didn't. Because Richards wasn't challenging her rank, he was challenging her presence, her right to stand here at all. "What scenario?" she asked evenly. Richard's lips curled faintly. "Hostile extraction, enemy ambush. Your job, get them out alive." He gestured, and 20 recruits assembled in formation, rifles slung, sweat glistening on their brows. Their faces carried a mix of nerves and curiosity. Lily studied them, then the terrain. A mock village of plywood walls and sandbags had been set up, complete with alleys, blind corners, and high perches. The kind of place where one mistake could unravel everything. She inhaled slowly, then spoke. "We move in staggered columns, 2 fire teams, cover angles. No one breaks formation without my order." The recruits hesitated. Some shifted, skeptical. One finally muttered, "Why should we listen to her?" The words hung heavy. Richards didn't stop them. He wanted this. He wanted doubt to grow like a crack in stone. Lily didn't raise her voice. She just met the recruit's eyes. "Because hesitation will get you killed. You don't have to like me. You just have to survive. Your choice." A silence. Then slowly the recruit nodded. They moved. The mock exercise ignited instantly. Blank rounds cracking, smoke grenades filling the air, instructors shouting as enemy fire lit the alleys. Recruits scattered, nerves threatening to break formation. "Hold the line," Lily barked, voice cutting through the chaos. She moved with precision, her rifle up, eyes scanning angles. Not a recruit fumbling her way forward, an officer, seasoned and unflinching. She saw the trap before it snapped shut. A flanking maneuver from the east alley, instructors playing the enemy pressing to crush them. "Second team cover fire west wall," she shouted. "First team pivot east suppressing fire now." The recruits obeyed, stumbling at first, then with growing steadiness. Smoke filled their lungs, the noise deafening, but under her orders they moved like pieces locking into place. They breached the central square where the ambush crescendoed. Blank fire hammered them from every side. Recruits wavered, fear flashing in their eyes. Lily's voice cut sharp, "On me." She pushed forward, low and fast, signaling with her hand. A wall of plywood loomed, enemy fire rattling from behind it. She signaled again, 2 recruits flanking, 1 covering. She breached with them, clearing the space in seconds. The instructors called it, "Scenario complete." Silence fell, broken only by the recruits' ragged breathing. Smoke drifted. The instructors exchanged looks. Then one of the recruits spoke, voice shaky but filled with something new. "Respect." "She got us through." Another added louder, "We made it." The words spread, a murmur growing into something undeniable. Richard's jaw tightened. His trap had backfired. Lily stood tall, her chest rising with the steady rhythm of controlled breath. She looked at Richards, not with arrogance, not with triumph, but with calm certainty. "Sometimes protocol wins the exercise," she said evenly, "but initiative wins the war." For the first time, Richards had no reply. Later that evening, back in her office, Lily stared at her report again. The day's events had written themselves into its pages. She had proved what the papers only suggested, but proving it once wouldn't be enough. Richards would keep coming, others too, she knew it. And dropped by, their faces lit with something halfway between pride and disbelief. "You own that field," said, grinning. Richards looked like he swallowed a grenade. Added quietly, "You're building something here. They're starting to follow you, even the ones who doubted." Lily shook her head. "Respect built on one exercise is as fragile as paper. It burns quick." "Then we keep feeding the fire," said simply. But when they left, Lily sat alone, her reflection staring back from the darkened window. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt the weight of every eye, every expectation, every shadow Richards would send against her. The storm outside had passed, but the storm inside Fort was only beginning. And somewhere deep down, Lily knew, this was no longer just about her report. This was about survival. What happens when the battle isn't fought with rifles and storms, but with whispers, papers, and knives in the dark? The days that followed her exercise victory were quiet, too quiet. Fort's routines marched on trucks rumbling across gravel, recruits drilling in endless formations, the sound of boots striking pavement in perfect rhythm. Outwardly, everything looked the same, but beneath the surface the air was different, thick, waiting. Lily felt it every time she walked across the grounds. Salutes given a fraction too late. Conversations that halted the moment she approached. Whispers curling like smoke in her wake. She had won the field exercise. She had silenced doubt in front of the recruits. But silence didn't mean loyalty. It meant something was coiling, building, waiting for its chance to strike. And she knew exactly who was pulling the strings. Colonel Richards hadn't spoken to her since the tribunal. Not one word, but his shadow was everywhere. Officers grew colder, clipped in their responses. Training schedules shifted suddenly, pulling resources from areas Lily needed for her assessment. Files she requested went missing, then reappeared days later. Soldiers who once nodded with respect now looked away, their expressions shuddered. It was a war waged not with weapons, but with erosion. A steady grind designed to weaken her step by step. One evening, as the last light bled from the horizon, burst into her office. His face was pale, his words rushed. "Captain, you need to see this." He dropped a folder on her desk. Inside, copies of memos, each stamped with Richard's approval. Allegations. Reports claiming Lily had coordinates during the rescue, endangered lives with reckless judgment, manipulated and into following her. Her hands tightened around the papers until they crumpled. "Where did you get these?" Overheard two officers talking near the motor pool, said. "Word is Richards is building a case. He's not going to stop at reassignment. He's going to bury you." The weight of it pressed down hard. She had expected Richard's fury, but this was slower, smarter. He wasn't attacking her choices anymore. He was rewriting them. She set the folder down carefully, her voice steady. "Then we give him no ammunition. Every step we take, every action, we make it flawless. No gaps, no excuses." But as she said it, she felt the knot in her stomach tighten, because perfection in war was impossible, and Richards knew it. That night, unable to sleep, Lily walked the perimeter of the base. The stars stretched cold and sharp overhead, the air crisp after days of storm. Her boots crunched against gravel as she thought of words. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She wondered if silence was still enough. The following morning, her assessment brought her to the communications wing. She interviewed operators, reviewed logs, traced the delay that had nearly cost his life. Every line of evidence pointed to one truth. Richards had stalled authorization, clinging to protocol while minutes bled away. The report in her hands was becoming a weapon, one that could shatter Richards' career, maybe even his legacy. And yet, holding it, she felt no triumph, only weight, because once she submitted it, there was no going back. That afternoon found her outside the barracks, his face grim. "Captain, you need to know something. Richards isn't just coming after you, he's coming after us. And me. Says we disobeyed, says we followed you blindly. If he takes you down, he's dragging us with you." The words hit harder than she expected. She had prepared herself to face consequences. But they had followed because they trusted her, because in the storm she had given them no reason to doubt. Was loyalty now their undoing? She exhaled slowly. "I won't let that happen." Studied her eyes sharp. "How, if you go down, we go too? That's how he's framing it." Lily didn't answer. Not yet, but the thought gnawed at her like rot in wood. That night in the mess hall, the tension broke into something sharper. A group of recruits sat clustered at a table, their voices just loud enough to carry. "Hero, huh?" one sneered. "Funny how the captain shows up just in time to save the general, almost like she knew it was coming." Another laughed. She wasn't saving lives. She was making herself look good, but the whole thing was staged. The words sliced through the air, aimed to wound. Started to rise, fury blazing in his face. But Lily caught his arm before he could move. She shook her head. Silence. Dignity. She stood instead, tray in hand, and walked past the table. The recruits fell silent as she passed, their smirks fatting. She didn't look at them, didn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. But inside, the anger burned white-hot. Not for herself, but for the way truth was being twisted, the way loyalty was being poisoned. 2 days later, the test came. A training exercise scheduled by Richards, mass casualty simulation, full base involvement, ordered Lily to observe and evaluate. Richards was in command. It was a stage set perfectly. If Richards failed, he could claim sabotage. If Lily spoke, he could accuse her of undermining him. The trap was subtle but clear. The exercise began at dawn. Smoke grenades, simulated explosions, recruits carrying mock wounded across muddy fields, radios chattering with orders. At first it ran smoothly, too smoothly. Lily watched carefully, her notes precise. Then delays, orders misrouted, teams waiting for commands that never came, minutes stretching into dangerous gaps. Her pen scratched the truth into her notebook. Hesitation, failure of initiative, command paralysis. But then one squad froze entirely, trapped in the simulation of an ambush. Their radio calls went unanswered, panic spread, and Lily knew Richards was letting them fail. Her chest tightened. This wasn't an exercise anymore. It was a demonstration proof, staged at the cost of his own men, that without strict command, chaos reigned. She couldn't stay silent, not this time. She grabbed the nearest radio. "Squad Echo, break right flank. Cover fire from second line, fall back to grid 6. Move." The squad obeyed instantly, relief flooding their voices as they escaped the trap. But across the field, Richard's head snapped toward her, fury blazing in his eyes. The exercise ended in chaos, Richard storming across the mud, shouting orders, officers scrambling. And at the center, Lily, radio still in her hand, recruits looking at her as though she had been the only one truly leading them. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard stepped close, his voice low and venomous. "You just signed your own death warrant, Captain." She stood tall, her face calm despite the storm inside. "Better mine than theirs." That night in her barracks, Lily stared at her unfinished report. Her pen hovered over the page. She knew what the truth demanded, but truth came with a cost, and for the first time the cost wasn't hers alone. Every recruit who had chosen to follow her when the storm raged, they would all carry the weight of her decision. Her reflection stared back from the dark window, her face tired, her eyes unyielding. And the question pressed harder than ever. When loyalty pulls in one direction and truth in another, what do you choose? What happens when the last decision you make isn't on the battlefield, but in the silence of a room where truth waits to be spoken aloud? The summons came at dawn. A sharp knock against the barracks door, a voice clipped and formal. "Captain Major General, his office, now." The corridor outside smelled of coffee and damp wool. Soldiers moved past in quiet rhythm, their glances quick, their whispers hushed. Everyone knew. The exercise, the radios. The fight no longer hidden between Lily and Richards. Today it would break into the open. And walked her to headquarters. Their uniforms were immaculate, boots polished to a mirror shine, but their eyes carried exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that comes not from lack of sleep, but from carrying fear you can't shake. "You don't have to take us down with you," muttered as they climbed the steps. Lily stopped. She looked at them both. "I won't. Whatever happens in there, the blame falls on me, not you." His jaw tightened. "Don't make promises you can't keep." The secretary ushered them into his office. The room was crowded again. On crutches, pale but alert. 3 senior officers seated along the wall. A video screen alive with 2 generals patched in from Washington. At the center, behind his desk, hands folded. And Richard standing tall, eyes blazing. "Captain," began, his tone grave, "we're here to review your actions during the most recent exercise. There are concerns about your interference in command decisions." Richard stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Concerns? She undermined my authority, seized control of radio channels, and compromised the chain of command. She turned a controlled exercise into chaos." He jabbed a finger toward her, fury spilling into every syllable. "This so-called captain is reckless, dangerous. She cannot be trusted with soldiers' lives." The words cut through the air. For a moment the room was still. Then turned to Lily. "Captain, your account." She stood at attention, her hands steady, though inside her chest the storm beat hard. The squad was stranded. Their calls went unanswered. If I hadn't intervened, they would have been cut off completely. "Sir, it may have been simulation, but hesitation in war kills just as surely as live fire." Her voice softened, but the steel remained. "I didn't undermine command. I preserved lives. That's what matters." Richards barked a bitter laugh. "Lives? This was an exercise, Captain. No one was dying. You overstepped because you wanted the spotlight, again." The words stung, not because they were true, but because she knew others in the room might believe them. Shifted, wincing as he leaned forward on his crutch. "Colonel Richards," he said, his voice sharp, "let's not pretend. If this had been live combat, your hesitation would cost lives. Captain recognized that. She acted." "You defend her no matter what," Richards snapped, because she saved you. His eyes hardened, because she was right. Silence cracked across the room. Raised a hand, his gaze turned to Lily. Captain, you've been preparing an assessment of Fort's protocols. Is it complete? Her throat tightened. This was the moment. Her report lay finished in her quarters. Every page was truth written in her hand. Truth that condemned Richards. Truth that would vindicate her. But truth that might also stain even every recruit who had chosen to follow her. She saw their faces in her mind. Loyal but brash. Steady as stone. The recruits in the ravine looking to her in the storm. Truth or loyalty, which mattered more? Her fingers curled into fists. She felt the weight of eyes on her, the quiet judgment of the burning hatred of Richards. And then she breathed, slow, steady. My report is complete, she said softly. It states that during both the real rescue and the training exercise, command delays created unnecessary risk. Protocol, as it stands, prioritizes order over survival. That is failure. Soldiers deserve better. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. But it also states that those who followed me into danger, privates, and did so not out of blind obedience but trust. They trusted my judgment when protocol offered none. They should not be punished for loyalty. Her words hung in the air. Richard's face twisted. So you admit it. You admit you violated orders, undermined authority, and trained soldiers to follow you instead of their chain of command. But raised a hand again. His voice was calm, final. Enough. He turned to Lily. Captain, you will submit your report formally by the end of the day. Your recommendations will be reviewed by higher command. Effective immediately, you remain at Fort until the review is complete. Then his gaze shifted to Richards. Colonel Richards, you've been given opportunities to adapt. You've failed. You're relieved of your command pending reassignment. The words dropped like a hammer. Richards froze, his face draining of color. You can't. Dismissed, Colonel said, his voice unyielding. For a moment, Richards looked as though he might explode. His mouth opened, then closed. He saluted sharply, the gesture filled with venom, and marched from the room. His boots struck the floor like gunshots until they faded into silence. The tribunal dissolved. Officers filed out. The video screens flickered off. Lingered a moment longer, his gaze resting on Lily. You chose the hard path, he said quietly. The one with no guarantees. That's the only path worth walking. She nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her chest. Hours later, as the sun bled into the horizon, Lily stood on the parade ground alone. The day was done. Richards was gone. The storm, for now, had passed. But the questions remained. Would higher command honor her truth? Would the whispers of suspicion fade or grow sharper? Would the loyalty of and the others endure when the next storm came? She didn't know, she couldn't. What she did know was this. When the moment came, she had acted. She had chosen lives over protocol, truth over silence, dignity over fear. And sometimes that was enough. The wind stirred across the empty field. She closed her eyes, letting it wash over her, carrying with it the echoes of every decision, every step through storm and fire. And in that quiet, the lesson carved itself into her soul. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.